Although the word was finally in the dictionary, juniper had to be careful in referring to the ultra-rich by that name. The thought it was too derogatory and sounded like some guttural sound an animal makes. Hello, my name is Susan Miller. I'm from Baraboo, and I'm the Vice President of Public Relations for the Reedsburg Area Toastmasters Club. I personally have been with Toastmasters for 6 years now, and I keep coming back because I love the camaraderie, the ability to improve my communication skills, the incentive to write a short story, and listening to all kinds of stories from my fellow members. Some of our Toastmasters are going to tell you a story of their own making. Most of these are tall tales, so be ready to stretch your imagination. For those of you who are not familiar with Toastmasters, we have been around since the 1930s. Toastmasters originally started in America as an organization to teach people how to give speeches. It has now been expanded all over the world, and it not only teaches people how to communicate more effectively, but teaches people leadership principles as well. Toastmasters has kept a pace with all the new forms of communication with different pathways that emphasize podcast, Zoom meetings, and much more. When an individual joins Toastmasters, they take a quiz that assigns them their own individual pathway that is designed to help them reach their specific destination, whether it is leadership, speech making, or simply writing a tall tale like those you will hear now. You can find out more about Toastmasters by checking online, or you can reach out to our own club by email at reedsburgtoastmasters@yahoo.com. Or you can find us on Facebook by searching for Reedsburg Area Toastmasters. I'm going to tell you the first story, a fractured fairy tale, and you will soon know what fairy tale I have fractured. It is called True Intentions. Juniper dragged herself out of bed and got ready for another full day setting explosions at the Abelman mine. She made her way down the hall past the cubicles of the other sleeping workers until she got to the communal kitchen where she washed down some ant larvae. She adjusted her belongings on the bicycle and took off down Highway 136 past the long rows of worker warrens that led to the Abelman Gorge near Baraboo. She was early, so she took her time and enjoyed the cool wind playing with her long white hair. She had just turned 27, so her hair had not fallen out yet, but it was decidedly white from the chemicals. Her thin, angular body ached under the load of the heavy safety equipment, but she knew that was a small price to pay for her protection. Although she was not as strong as some of her other co-workers, she was adept at planting dynamite in just the right spots to ensure quality rock for the She passed a billboard extolling the virtues of Baraboo quartzite, the fashionable red rock that the love to use in their homes and gardens. The love the ancient rock, especially the big slabs with ripples on them, imprints of being at the bottom of the great inland sea at one time. Juniper thought it was ironic that Baraboo quartzite had become the newest feng shui way for the to attract more wealth, since being around it all day had done nothing to improve her own lot in life, although it had caused Baraboo to balloon in size in the 2070s. Although the word was finally in the dictionary, Juniper had to be careful in referring to the ultra-rich by that name. The Ers thought it was too derogatory and sounded like some guttural sound an animal makes. Juniper thought that was appropriate since wanton greed reduced the Ers to the gnashing sounds of a carnivorous animal. It was not even fair to compare them to animals, she thought, since most animals just take what they need for survival and do not make a habit of hoarding. She finally arrived at the mine site with its roar of large equipment, the rumbling almost toppling her off her bike. "Juniper, you're early," shouted her boss above the roar of the bulldozers. "I need you to work your magic on that last bit of quartzite across from the old Van Heist rock. If you follow those tread marks and then look up, you'll find a rectangular slab that looks just like a doorway. I would like to be able to get that slab in one piece for an living up in Door County." Juniper picked her way up the embankment after hoisting up her rucksack full of the dynamite necessary for the job. She could see why this bit of Baraboo quartzite had yet to be blasted, since it was up a steep cavity in the hill. As she was climbing up, she thought she heard a bird, but knew that was impossible since they had all become extinct in the last 30 years. She clung to an old stump as she heaved herself up the last bit of talus rock. At closer inspection, she realized it did look quite like a doorway, if that doorway was for someone 4 feet tall. Juniper started using the claw chisel around the perceived doorway, knocking bits of rubble out of the way to plant her dynamite. She was busy at this task when she heard what sounded like a heavy door being opened from deep within the rock. She stopped and tried to figure out what she was hearing and decided it must be heavy machinery on the other side of the quarry. She pounded a bit more of the debris out of the crevice when suddenly a heavy rock bounced out of the rock embankment to the right of her head and tumbled down the steep talus. "Please, please stop! Don't destroy our home! I beseech you!" screamed an elfin man who had popped his head out of the hole vacated by the rock. Juniper was dazed. Was she dreaming? "Please save us! No further destruction! Please!" Juniper finally found her voice and said, "I will do as you wish, but I will be thrown in prison if I don't do my job." "You can have that piece of rock over there," the elf said, pointing to a similar slab on the other side of the hill. "And to show our gratitude for saving our home, I will grant you 3 wishes." Suddenly, the little man was no more to be seen. When she could finally leave the quarry and bicycle home, Juniper thought about the old Grimm's tale of a woodsman being granted 3 wishes for not cutting down a fairy's tree. She remembered that the woodsman and his wife had squandered their wishes by blurting out desires they had not intended, such as wishing for a piece of sausage to go with some bread. In that long ago tale, the woodcutter was angry with his wife for wishing for bread, so he wished for a piece of sausage to go up her nose, one that could not be removed without using up their last wish. Juniper was adamant she would not make the same mistake. She made her way back to her warren, thinking about what she would wish for. Even if it was a psychotic episode triggered by a lack of protein, she could at least toy with the idea. She thought about the Ers and their beautiful homes so far removed from the minions who toiled in the polluted places. The Ers found havens where pollution, insects, and crime did not reach them. Tucked away under individual domes were only a landing pad for their hovercraft connected them to the outside world. What do I really want? She thought about all the things that tormented her, and she knew what her first wish would be. She put on a turquoise silk scarf she inherited from her grandmother. It was a wide scarf she could wrap her body in, and this she did after brushing out her long white hair, readying herself for the coming transformation. She was now ready. I wish to have beauty and peacefulness surround me, Juniper said out loud, thinking about the old Navajo chant about having beauty above, beauty below, and beauty all around. Juniper suddenly found herself sitting on a little knoll, breathing in clean, fragrant air surrounded by green. Species of trees she had never seen before towered above her head with full green headdresses. She had never seen trees so tall, but a whistle and a splash soon pulled her eyes away from the swaying trees as she turned her attention to a gurgling brook. Baby bluebirds were taking turns splashing in water as if they had invented splashing. The song of birds. She was enchanted as she watched a goldfinch take a drink of water, trying to avoid the bustling bluebirds in their bath. A beautiful orange insect flew by as if drunk, tilting erratically. She remembered seeing pictures of butterflies in a museum and realized what she was seeing. I did it, she thought. The elf was real. Juniper could not believe her good fortune. As the sun was starting to set, it cast golden rays into her little glen, and the birds sang their last sweet songs of the evening. Juniper realized she was no longer being badgered by the hordes of insects, since there were now birds to eat them, so she decided to make a little nest for herself. As she nodded off to the sound of crickets, alone in her makeshift nest, she knew what her next wish would be. The song of the birds woke her the next morning, and she knew it was time to announce her second wish. I wish to have a mate by my side, she declared, more confident this time that her wish would come true. The bushes across the stream parted, and a raven-haired man emerged. He strode up the slope towards her, at first looking a little dazed, until his deep green eyes locked in on her and he smiled. She was still wearing her blue silk scarf, and she was not prepared for his nakedness. But once he touched her hand, she felt like she had never been touched before. She took off her scarf and playfully wrapped it around his neck, feeling the need to show her whole self to him. They played in the stream together and followed it out to a lake where they swam, fished, and sang songs to each other. Before night fell, she knew she would have to make her last wish before she accidentally mentioned something she did not intend. She went back to the knoll where she had first found herself and made her last wish. I wish that the world would return to a state of perfect harmony before humans influence the fate of the other species on the planet. She felt a twinge and looked down at her feet, and instead found she had white paws. Astonished, all the hair on her back stood on end, while her large white ears twisted as she tried to listen to the sounds around her. She heard a raucous cry high above the trees and realized why the birds were silent. She hopped quickly down a narrow path, but it was too late. A green-eyed raven clasped her in his talons and bore her up to a large tree. She squealed as he dropped her into a nest full of baby ravens ready to tear her apart. Seeing her turquoise scarf in the nest, her last thought was she had done no better than the woodsman of old. Thanks for listening.
I joined the Reedsburg Area Toastmasters 4 years ago during the speechcraft class the club hosts every year. Toastmasters has helped me gain confidence in public speaking and has also helped improve my grammar to better convey my message. I have worked as a mail carrier for the United States Postal Service for 20 years, and you'll never believe what happened to me today. It started the same as any other day. I arrived at the post office at 7:30 to pick up the mail for today's deliveries. After I loaded my truck, I was off to my first delivery. As I was walking along, I came upon a letter addressed to a decrepit old house that I thought was vacant. When I opened the rusty old mailbox to deliver the letter, something pulled me inside. I did a somersault and tumbled onto the back of a horse. We were running through a forest. I reached into my satchel, pulled out a letter, and the postmark read, May 14th, 1673. I was dodging branches as my horse weaved through the trees when an angry pack of wolves started to chase us. I urged the horse to go faster, and before I knew it, we were plunging into a raging river. I was holding as tight as I could when a grizzly bear knocked me off my horse with a huge salmon. The next thing I knew, I was riding in a train car, sorting mail. Letters and packages for all over the United States filled the car. I looked at the postmark at the letter in my hand. It read, May 14th, 1863. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone on a horse riding next to the train. Suddenly, a masked bandit jumped into the car and demanded me to surrender the mail. I vowed to protect the sanctity of the mail, so I lunged at the bandit and started swinging. I kicked and punched, but as I grappled for control, I felt myself fly out of the side of the train. I landed in the cockpit of an airplane. High in the sky, flying over mountains and trees, I was surrounded by bags of mail. I pulled a letter out of the bag, and the postmark read, May 14th, 1928. The trees got thicker below me, and all of a sudden, a huge flock of birds flew right at my windshield. I turned the wheel right, then left. The whole plane started spinning. I held on tight until, to my relief, it righted itself. It was eerily quiet, and I wondered if I died and was floating up to heaven. But when I looked around, I saw I was surrounded by computer screens, lights, and so many switches and buttons. I realized I was flying in a drone. The computers in front of me had an endless list of addresses for package delivery and package pickups. There were thousands of packages in the cargo area. When I looked at the postmark, it was dated May 14th, 2031. I was in the future. I programmed the drone to land at my next delivery, grabbed a pile of packages, and knocked on the door. An angry man and an angry dog opened the door. They were both snarling and foaming at the mouth. Where have you been? The man asked. I ordered this stuff 2 hours ago. You should have been here sooner than this. Just then, the dog broke free from the log chain it was tied to and began chasing me down the sidewalk. I dropped the packages and ran. Then I tripped over a huge rock and fell on my face. When I turned around, I saw the decrepit old house with the rusty old mailbox that had pulled me inside. There was no angry dog chasing me anymore. So when I stood up, brushed myself off, I reached into my mail satchel, and the letter I pulled out was postmarked today, May 14th, 2020. Not just another day as a mail carrier.
I live and work in the Wisconsin Dells. I've been a member of the Reedsburg Area Toastmasters since 2016 and joined the Toastmasters organization itself in 2011 to improve my speaking abilities. Now, along the way, I've also gained some valuable leadership experience. Tonight, I plan to tell a short, tall tale called The Magic Boot. Now, the Magic Boot is cobbled together from European folklore and also family lore. I will begin by introducing some of the main characters in my story. John Sims, a railway man who was married to my grandmother's sister, Evelyn. John and Evelyn were dear people. John worked for the L&N Railway, and he had this notorious habit of collecting treasures. In other words, he would bring home unusual objects. And family and friends wondered why in the world he would do this. The most famous example was that beautiful lady's shoe that he brought home. He was confident that someday he would find a mate to that shoe. He would put those shoes on his wife's feet, and he would take her out dancing, out on the town for dancing. Now, in tonight's story, I'm going to substitute a magic boot for that lady's shoe. So we're going to join John and Evelyn in their living room. John has brought home this boot, and he shows it to Evelyn. And Evelyn exclaims, "John, what have you brought home now?" John says, I have confidence that I'm going to find the mate to this boot, and that somebody's going to get some use out of these boots. Well, Evelyn really got tired of tripping over that smelly old boot. One day she just confronted John and said, "John, we got to get rid of that boot. I can't have it in my house anymore." And over the next several weeks, both John and Evelyn had put that boot in the trash, and they were confident that it was miles down the road, hauled away by the garbage men. But the boot kept reappearing, and Evelyn was losing her patience. Now, John had an inspiration. He kept having problems with this old free rider who kept hitching rides on the L&N Railway, a one-legged vagabond. So he decided he was going to present this boot to that old guy and make his life a little easier. John had a notion where that old vagabond would be sleeping. He found his favorite boxcar, found him asleep, dreaming all sorts of wonderful dreams. He gently set that boot next to that one-legged vagabond. And when that vagabond woke up, he was so surprised. He put that boot on. It fit perfectly. He hopped down from the boxcar, took a long stride, and did that vagabond ever get a surprise? He found himself 7 miles down the track in one stride. And then he takes another stride, and he ends up even further down the track. So he turns around, takes 2 more strides, and now he's back in the rail yard. He says, I got me a magic boot. Now the next day, John is taking the locomotive out down the railroad track, and he sees the vagabond. And the vagabond waves his walking stick to John. So John proceeds down the track. At 7 miles down the track at the next railroad crossing, he sees the vagabond again. John does a double take. How did he cover so much territory in a few minutes? And John kept seeing the one-legged traveler with his magic boot alongside the railroad tracks. And it dawned on John what was going on. That was not some old smelly boot. That was a magic boot. That was one of the 7 league boots that his grandmother used to tell him about in the fairy tales. Now, 7 league boots enable their travelers to travel 7 miles in 1 step. Now, our traveler got some great use out of that 7 league boot. And it made John's heart leap for joy every time he saw the traveler alongside the tracks. Now, John did think it was only fair to warn the citizens in his community. When you take that beautiful blueberry cobbler out of the oven, I know you'll be tempted to set it on the porch and let it cool, but don't you do it. For that 7 league traveler will surely nab that pie and be in the next county before you can say, Pinocchio. Thank you for listening.
I've been a member of Toastmasters since 2013, first with the Rolling Hills Club in Richland Center, and presently with the Reedsburg Area Toastmasters. Both are really excellent groups to be a part of. I joined to help with interpersonal communications at work when I was applying for a promotion to a supervisory position. I stayed not only for the opportunity to exercise some creative muscles when writing speeches, but more importantly, because of the amazing people I meet and get to spend time with. Rather than telling a tall tale, I will be telling 3 short stories about my personal experience with communication and problems that miscommunications have caused, even with the best of intentions. So, the title of my speech is, Am I Talking to Myself? I was on the phone with my mom, trying to sort out the initial details of a family vacation. The school calendar and placement schedule was spread across the table, and I'm Google searching when Easter was going to fall in 2018 and comparing it with spring break, and then all of a sudden a semi crashes with a car. The car rolls over and over until it finally hits the couch and stops up against some construction equipment parked there. Boys, I'm on the phone. Take your crash site somewhere else. Just then a large chopper comes in, blades piercing the air, and the search and rescue team approach from the kitchen with its basket ready to lift the driver to safety. Don't worry, Caleb, help is on the way, Wyatt shouts. He's manning the helicopter. He is my son, he's 6. Hello, I'm on an important phone call here. Put the chopper in stealth mode and get out. But Caleb's in trouble. We may need to have the jaws of life come. Sometimes when talking doesn't work, the mom death stare works better. So I tried that. All the vehicles got picked up, and I heard a chorus of sorry mom fade down the hallway as they scampered away. Do you ever feel like you're talking to yourself, or like attempts to communicate are completely in vain? At times it's hard not to wonder. A week ago, we're packing for a short weekend to Oshkosh to celebrate my grandpa's 75th birthday. Granted, it wasn't a week ago this year, it was a week ago when I wrote this speech because nobody's going anywhere right now. At that time, though, I had a cooler of food, I'm packing the badminton set, lawn chairs, extra things for the trip due to the party. It should all fit, though, because we don't have that much luggage for a weekend. Won't take up too much space, right? And Wyatt bounds down the stairs to ask, what do we need to pack? 2 socks, 2 underwear, 2 shorts, maybe 3 shirts in case you wear part of your meal, and a pair of pajamas. Okay, he goes back upstairs. 30 seconds later, Caleb appears. What do we need to pack? And I said, didn't you just talk to your brother? You're upstairs together. He says he can't remember. Great. You need 2 socks, 2 underwear, 2 shorts, possibly 3 shirts, and a pair of pajamas. I continued packing the cooler, and I hear suitcases bouncing down the stairs, thinking, good, they've succeeded. Just pile your stuff by the door. I come out of the kitchen, and what do I see? 2 suitcases, 2 pillows, 2 bags full of toys, plus a mountain of blankets and stuffed animals, including a giant duck and a brown dog, easily bigger than both the pillows. What happened to 2 small suitcases? Why do we need all this? We're going for the weekend, not a month. The pillows and blankets and toys, that stuff they have. Clearly nobody's listening, though. My 2 boys are rummaging through the DVDs, arguing over what they'll be watching on the way. Heaven forbid we should just ride to Oshkosh. So, guys, if you're taking all this, you're hauling it out, and the cooler and my duffel bag still have to fit in the van. Off they go, and I come out a while later to find the aforementioned gear and 2 bikes in the back of the van. Yes, add more stuff. That's totally what I said. We wiggle the cooler back into the van. My duffel bag, I'm pretty sure, ended up on the passenger seat, and we're finally on the way to my parents' place, fully loaded. Now, there is a possibility that there's a significant disconnect between what I say and what they hear. Toastmasters stresses that important difference and helps to teach us to listen better. But, unfortunately, not everyone we communicate with is a highly trained Toastmaster. It's Friday evening. We're building a bonfire to roast hot dogs and marshmallows. It's a perfect night for it, and the fire's been burning strong for about half an hour. So I say, don't touch anything, stay back from the fire. I'm going to go in and get the hot dogs. It'll only be a minute, and there's a window in the kitchen that overlooks the backyard, so I figure I can still keep an eye on them. I go in, I dig through the refrigerator for the hot dogs and the ketchup. The buns are sitting out, just have to get the meat cut open, and then I look out the window. Wyatt's holding his poking stick out away from him and smiling broadly because it's on fire. I rush out of the house and cry, what are you doing? I said, stay back from the fire. I am. I used the lighter. The fire was getting puny and Caleb needed a torch to see his chair. There's so many things wrong with that. What just happened here? Didn't I say, don't touch anything? But I know how to work the lighter. See, you just push the button and slide this thingy here. Doesn't matter. I said, don't touch anything. That includes the lighter. In fact, especially the lighter. That thing's supposed to be childproof, though evidently not against my 6-year-old. It's dangerous, Wyatt. Also, Caleb doesn't need a torch. But he couldn't find his chair. This chair, it's not that dark out here. And if he can't find his chair, he can stand and not touch anything until I come back. You know what? Give me the lighter. You can both come in and help me, bring the food out, and the roasting sticks. That sounds safer. Lots of people tend to hear what they want to hear. In other words, their own variation of what you've actually said. In many cases, I agree there's room for interpretation. However, my kids seem to take great license with that interpretation. For example, I say, I'll think about it, and the boys here keep pestering me incessantly until you wear down my defenses. I say, I'll be there to help in a minute. And the boys here continues scaling the counter. See if your brother can give you a boost in the meantime. I say, come back, you can't swim with the seals. And Wyatt hears, run faster. Show Mom you do fit between the railing and the cement wall on the front of the seal enclosure. Clearly, it's an interpretation problem where can't was mistaken for you shouldn't swim at all when it's 40 degrees outside and you'll get us banned from the zoo. A very common misinterpretation. That could happen to anyone, right? So, my tips for being heard and understood when communicating. 1, speak up, as sometimes it's hard to be heard over the chaos and commotion, at least at my house. 2, choose your words carefully so your intended meaning is abundantly clear and there's no room for loopholes. And 3, it will help the person you're speaking with greatly if you are not their mother. Thank you for listening and joining the group for our stories.